When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ludlow, and enjoy today's episode.
All right, question for both of you. Tim, you broached on this just a little bit, right? So we talked about it a little bit earlier as well. Where we're at right now is sort of a changing of the guard. When you're talking about security leadership and the folks have been in the industry now for 2 decades, 2.5 decades, our class, we're about the same age. I might have a year or two on you, are now elevating into those senior leadership roles. They're now starting their own businesses, right? Or now getting mature in their businesses. Talk to me a little bit about the differences that you see and what you think the new class of leaders needs to do specifically to be successful, whether in the corporate industry, whether owning businesses, as you're partnering with corporate security leaders and things like that. So
take us away. I'll follow up.
I loved when you touched base, Tim, on being a role model and a mentor. If we do see those people that are standing, quietly in the shadows, we should really take an approach on them and take them underneath our wings and let them see what we see. And I mean, we all started at the beginning in the shadows and we're scared. I mean, I know I was terrified to come to anything like this. And I would have loved if somebody would have approached me and said, hey, you know what? I know, what is it that you want and who do you want to meet? And I came to convention and conferences with a list of people, but I didn't know if I could approach them. So if somebody came up to me and said, oh, you want to meet that person? I know that person. And I loved the fact that you said, let me share my knowledge with you. Let me share my connections with what I know in them to build you for success. And I think that's really what we need to do. And even with training or anything else, we just need to come in together and work together. There's too much eyes around, and we really just need to come in and use our strengths. And if I'm weak somewhere, I know Tim is strong somewhere, that he's going to come in and pick it up from there. And be humble. You nailed it. Be humble. If you don't know something, then you don't know it. And let somebody else come in and do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, thanks for the question, Josh. I think what we need to do as an industry is really become interested in business acumen, building our security departments like a business unit. One of the biggest lies that we have been fed for the decades that I've been involved is that we're a cost center. We really provide no value here. We're just security. We don't have to act like the business units. And for the 2+ decades that I've been involved in security, every conference I go to, how do we get a seat at the table? How do I get budget? How do I? Well, it starts with not telling the business that you provide no value here whatsoever. Because when we act that way, then the business says, okay, well, we're going to treat them like an insurance policy. How much can we invest in them so that when something goes wrong, we can fire them and hire new and basically say, yeah, we were covered and security messed it up. So we need to learn how to use QuickBooks. We need to learn how a C corporation forms and governs itself. We need to learn about taxable fringe benefits and the tax code as it relates to C corporations, because this is going to give us the background to actually build our business case and speak organically in the environment that we're in, because we're not in the military anymore. We're not in law enforcement. And what we do is no longer a function of law. There is no law saying this type of security will be provided because it has to be. So we need to up our business acumen and start acting like a business unit.
Good deal. Thank you.
And as we go to the next question, any pitfalls in the industry? Are there just any particular things that just should be generally avoided, or anything that comes to mind in terms of things you come across that you think you need to watch out for?
Meaning like for myself or somebody coming new into the industry?
Anyone, someone that's in the space that's kind of navigating, whether it relates to dealing with others in the space or competition or making a statement or giving any risks that come to your mind or any things that have been challenging.
As somebody new in the industry, I mean, I'm an influencer on social media. I make things look awesome and cool and I educate and everything, but I also want people to know that I'm out there doing it and I'm real. I'm putting it to test, I'm putting it to work, and I'm truly genuinely putting out the material that I'm passionate about. So when somebody is new in the industry, they see social media making it look cool. They're going to be the next John Wick. They're going to make a lot of money in this industry. It looks great and glamorous, but we all know it's not. And you have to be cautious with that. And as well, you have to understand and respect client privacy. I'm not out there taking pictures with my clients. I am taking pictures of my location because it is absolutely gorgeous, but I am not posting that on social media. I might post it a month later and people are like, "Oh my God, you were in London?" No, I'm actually at my daughter's soccer game, but hey. But there's a fine line about coming into the industry. Um, and if I had to tell somebody coming in, watch what you post because your clients look at it. Watch what you post because your current employers look at it. And, and also beware of what you're posting because you could give a security, it becomes a security issue and the location and more details with anything. What are your thoughts?
That's a great point. And for all the geriatric viewers, when you post a photo later, it's known as a latergram. Thoughts on pitfalls?
Yeah, I see a couple things with people who are kind of starting to come to maturity within the industry. One, they'll bite off too much.
Yes.
They'll take on a project that they can't actually do. They'll overextend themselves in a way that compromises the project they're trying to do, the client relationship. Or on the other end of the scale, they'll decline things that they can totally learn how to do.
Mm.
And they'll give it to somebody else and they'll actually deprive themselves of the opportunity to learn a different specialty, learn a niche. And so what I tell people to do is if somebody comes to you and says, "Can you do this?" On some level, they think you can. And if you're not sure, ask a couple questions. Okay, why do you need this done? What's the problem you're trying to solve? 2, timelines. And 3, what does success look like for you? What does this look like done? How does it feel? We often forget that there's a user experience. Whether we're providing executive protection, that's a big deal. Also, if we're building corporate programs, we are impacting the culture and the employees of that company. So we need to make sure that we design for user experience. And then one of the things that I like to do is say, you know what? I haven't done that specific thing before, but let me ask around. Let me do a feasibility study. I'll come back to you in 2 weeks and I'll say, I think it's going to cost this much. We're going to have this team and this is how we're going to go about it. And this is perfectly acceptable in the business world. All the time, businesses take on new initiatives that really not everybody knows how to do. And so a feasibility study is done to say, how could we do this? And this gives you the opportunity to do some research, get help, and gain experience while providing an excellent deliverable. So don't bite off more than you can chew, and don't pass off projects that you can learn.
Absolutely.
We have a U.S. Marine with a microphone here. Looks like he may be asking a question here momentarily.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So you guys all work with high-value organizations. How do you properly assess the value of the problem that you solve for them? There's obviously what you price it at, but then there's like, what is the value of solving that problem and how do you assess it?
It's a good question. So right now, my portfolio with Kroll is essentially Fortune 100, AM Law 100, and ultra high net worth families. So depending on what they're asking me to solve, I'm not really being given a lot of tactical issues. I'm not really designing executive protection programs or helping them understand how to feel the guard force. A lot of times I'm speaking with the C-suite and they're telling me, look, this is where we're going and it's new for us. Here's our roadmap. What do we not know? What are we not seeing? What are the pitfalls? And so with that type of assessment, you're providing great value, right? And so you have to understand what it's worth to them. And so I'm not saying that you overcharge a company that can pay more, but you should be able to say it's going to take this much time to figure this out, this much collaboration, this much resource. That gives you a base cost. But if I'm creating a governance strategy, well, that's really valuable for a company, right? And so I may be able to say, well, it's going to cost me 30, 40,000 to do this, but I can charge them, 75 because there's strategic value there. Whereas if it was a more tactical project, there's not a lot more markup that you can do. And really, you should be setting these guidelines as a company, or if you're an individual consultant, you should be benchmarking with other people to kind of understand that. The other thing that people fail to do is when they're working with a company's assets, how do they value the loss of that asset? It's not up to you how valuable something is. It's up to them. They own it. And so having them tell you how valuable it is really helps you define what is an acceptable cost to mitigate the risk to that versus when does the cost become as valuable as the thing is, which means, is it really worth protecting it?
Yeah. I'm going to let you stick to that one. This is your lane, not mine.
Question is, what do you see in the transition of the people you work for? What are the principals demanding? Why do they want women executive protection agents?
Well, it's a great question. I'm seeing more women in demand. We are discreet. There's so many things that we bring to the table that is kind of not seen. It's should be brought to attention where we can bring like the little fine touches to having a female principal. I mean, in my bag kit, because we all carry bag kits or whatever for male and female. Well, I'm learning that there's little things that with females, like a compact mirror, they're putting lipstick on in the back seat, earring backings, ponytail holders. They wear heels a lot. Just little things, safety pins. Oh my gosh, safety pins are huge. I mean, it's things like I would never put that in my mail pack, for them if they needed something. So, and it's things like that. Or when they're getting their hair and makeup done in their hotel, the gentlemen, I mean, they're in their robes. They don't want some guy sitting there. At least I can come in and I can sit and I can see things. I can go through the schedule with them and then help them get dressed. I mean, sometimes they need the dress back, zipper zipped up. Or sometimes when they're done for the night, they need help taking that zipper down. They're not going to ask a male security guy to do it, or going to the restroom. There's just so many things that we do bring to the table, which is a really nice soft touch. Also that we blend in. We blend in very well, as the assistant, as the friend, as a cousin. It's a little bit softer to the eyes, where the guys that I've worked with, they're a little rigid and they stick out really bad. I wish we could work on that part of that. That's another subject we'll talk about. But I do see more women principals wanting females. And as you asked, Mark, about things changing with principals and how we protect them.
What are you hearing from the executive assistants and chief of staff? I mean, when we talked about this at length on the phone, that the executive assistants feel and chief of staff feel women are easier to communicate with versus the male counterpart because they have that barrier.
Absolutely. I've encountered this, and I've watched it firsthand where the principal or even the team lead would say, hey, this is what the principal wants to a gentleman, and the gentleman quickly cuts it off real fast. So, when they're talking, they're obviously not listening. They're not listening to what the principal actually needs. In this industry, we all know the principal leads the dance. We don't. So whatever the principal needs, that's what we provide for them. I find that women do sit and they listen, and they're like, okay, they're taking it in, they're processing it, they're trying to problem solve it. Like, what can we do? We understand where they're coming from, and we'll ask questions. I'm not saying all men do this and everything else, but just recently I have been seeing just the men just cut it up. Like, why would they do that? That's a security issue and everything else. Well, you also have to understand your limitations and your capabilities. If you cannot handle it, then that you should not be in that position. You should not be protecting that principle, because if you're questioning your head, then that's doubt. And then that means when it comes down to protecting that principle because something's happening, you're not going to be able to do that. So either learn to listen what the principal is doing or find something else in the line of work.
Can I build on that?
Yes, you
'Cause
may.
That was a great answer, actually. So, especially men coming out of government service into the executive protection industry, there is a very odd pressure to be Johnny on the spot, to absolutely immediately know, to know what the client needs before they ask for it. And I don't know where we get this from. I think it probably does come from the military, right? To anticipate and, all this stuff. But we end up looking like idiots. And we don't listen because we hear the first part, like, oh, okay, I know what I need to do. And you don't, because you're not them. You don't live that lifestyle. And you have no idea how they want to experience their inner circle, their life, and their business.
So true.
And so I think that it would be do well for men to realize they can slow down, they can ask questions, and really seek to understand the context they find themselves in. And with that rigidity, it's hilarious because I spent a lot of time building EP programs at Facebook. And when we would get people in, the first thing we would do is like, hey, put your hands in your pockets, slouch your shoulders, look like a geek.
Yes, blend in,
You have
please.
way too good a posture. Start saying and like and things like that. Use filler words. Don't talk so distinctly. Like, you're making people nervous. Don't act like a cop. Do you see any cops around? There's a reason for that, And you have to become comfortable with changing how you interact and affect the space. It's one of the reasons why I teach owning your presence. So we talk about when you walk into a space, whether it's physical, whether it's virtual, you leave a signature, an impact on that space. And once you realize what that is, you can tailor that to navigate situations better and produce better outcomes. So you're spot on.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming on the panel. Thanks, Chris, for moderating. Thanks, Renee. Thanks, Tim. And thanks for coming out and supporting this cause for Renee and women in security.
And here we are, still at the GSX conference here in Orlando, Florida, the Fearless Mindset podcast. I'm Chris Nyweem. I'm a Army veteran, Iraq veteran, and lobbyist and publicist who has the distinct honor of being here with Mark Ledlow and company. We're really excited about this. And we saved the heavyweights for last. So we're here with Jeff Slotnick, expert in this space, and we're excited to continue this conversation about some of the professional insights on the inside and things to learn, things to look at, exploring kind of where the space is going. And what do you think, Jeff? You start us off with, I know you've got a military background, Army, Command Sergeant Major, engineer. It sounds as though we were at the same distinguished location of Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. For anyone that has not been in the military, they call it Fort Lost in the Woods. And I'm confident there's privates and recruits being lost in the woods still at this time. Tell me about your background and how you came to be in this space, and where did this journey begin for you?
Well, interesting. I left the military and I worked for a little while in public sector. Didn't care for it. I didn't like the ethics, the backbiting, the politics, especially in a government position. So I decided to open my own company. where the values that I learned in the military, the ethics, the integrity that I had meaning. So I actually started out as a security guard. I had $3,000 to invest in my business. I bought a uniform, a patrol car, all my duty gear. And in Washington State, you have to have a license with each company that you work for. So I had a license with 4 companies, and I subcontracted to these companies. And I said, look, don't give me your grunt jobs. Give me your jobs where you need leadership, or you have a critical assignment. And it worked. I was able to generate funds. I worked like crazy. I was a single dad of 3 kids, and I found myself sleeping in my car between shifts, but I earned the money I needed to go to the next level. And then in 2001, I went to Bob Oatman School, R.L. Oatman and Associates, and because I had done military work on a PSD, personal security detail. And so I got trained in corporate executive protection, and I did corporate executive protection for several years because it paid a whole lot better than a security officer. And that morphed into consulting as I took the experience and the knowledge that I had in quality management systems and engineering and project management and a formal education in business management. I started seeing areas where I could help organizations improve. So we got into this field of risk, threat, and vulnerability assessments and audits and organizational resilience, efficiency studies, time and motion studies to help organizations be better.
Interesting. Um, what do you think are some of the big challenges in the industry today? Are there any glaring problems, or do you think that this is just any other space where you have bad actors, you have mostly good actors? Is there any glaring happening in the industry right now that kind of stands out to you?
I think we are at a crossroads. We are definitely on an upswing and improvement, primarily due to technology, right? Technology is driving so many things. And, we've got some folks in the industry that are kind of stodgy, if I had to choose a word that, are very old school thinkers, uh, and are not very collaborative. They're what I would call old guard security directors. And the problem with that is that if you want funding for your program, if you want to excel, then you have to speak the language of business, right? You can't speak security in the C-suite. It's a language barrier, right? So what security professionals have to do, and what many are doing now, and that's kind of the drive towards ESRM, is giving security leadership the ability to speak coherently in the C-suite to make the business case for what they do.
Right.
A lot of organizations that we work with, we help them to define what services do you provide, who do you provide them for, and what's the value of those services? And is the enterprise aware of the value of those services? Because that results in adequate funding for your program, funding for technology, funding for employees, funding for the things that you need to have a program that's excellent.
Interesting. In your view, is there a life cycle to the space? Now, everyone has their own goals, their own ambitions, et cetera. But someone coming in the space, what is a sort of a life cycle trajectory for someone that wants to come into this space and be successful? Is there benchmarks they should be hitting? Is there kind of one or two different ways someone can go? What is a sort of life cycle that you think that you could speak to?
Interesting. There are so many entries into security because the field is so varied. Look, private security as a security officer, moving up in that into sales, site manager, site supervisor, area manager, and that. Then, we've got executive protection, from being a person on a detail to leading a detail to managing multiple details, right? And then on the corporate security side, or even in retail loss prevention, you start out as an agent in the store watching for thieves, moving on up to managing corporate retail programs. So really, there's no single point of entry, but what I can say is get yourself educated, find yourself a good mentor, learn from others, identify the person that you want to be. Find somebody else that is the image of what you want to be, and then ask that person to assist you, to mentor you, to coach you and teach you, to help bring you along, to create opportunities, to introduce you to other influential people that can help your career.
I think there's a saying, success leaves clues. So I guess that would be consistent with that. Any particular career highlights you'd like to look at in terms of impact, impact, or perhaps some a challenging situation, or perhaps a situation where you were able to see a problem before someone else did and sort of ensure an outcome, or anything that involves kind of adjusting on the fly. We've heard a little bit this week about a job that comes up and the folks aren't ready for it. They need a company that's able to get in there and scale up quickly. Any sort of intuitions or situations where you think you had to ad hoc, or things that are kind of a wild card situations in your experience?
They're all wild card situations. Every company I go into is different. The problems are similar, but how they address those problems and deal with those problems are very different. As an outsider, as a third-party assessor, auditor looking to the inside, we have the ability of not being blinded by bias. We can look at things and identify those issues before they become issues. Now, I've had clients that, we've talked to, we've said, here's what you need to improve, and they totally ignored us. And, and we said, thank you. They paid us anyway, and we were happy. But on the other hand, we've had many clients where I've got clients that have been with us for 16 years, for 20 years, because we have become that trusted advisor. And it's not always about a billable hour. Sometimes it's a phone call and a conversation. Hey, Jeff, I'm confronted with this issue. What would you do? Or I'm looking for this type of technology. Which technology would you recommend? And it's all about a conversation. It's all about understanding your client's needs. So really, I've been called in after an earthquake to a major corporation that was having problems reestablishing its supply chain. I've been called into other major corporations that said, look, we're not really happy with the service we're receiving in our GSOC. Can you help us write a benchmark analysis and help us with KPIs and metrics for a GSOC? So it's in a good place, and I'm not having to deal with those major challenges. The one I did do and it was actually, it's a pro bono client. I work with a Jewish children's camp, and their board posted something online which led to all kinds of threats and a maelstrom of hate email and things like that. And they didn't know how to manage it. They didn't know how to deal with it. So they brought us in, and we got them hooked up with a PR firm, and we told them, ignore it. Don't respond to the emails. Increase security, which they did. Make local law enforcement aware of the threats that you're receiving. If any of them are significant threats, let's report them. Let's get the information from the email so we can move forward. And so we put that all into place pretty quickly. We talked with them. But most importantly, after the event, once, all those events, they start here, and then they rise, they peak, and then they drop off, and it falls off the media cycle. What we did is we pulled that whole board aside, and we essentially said, what were you thinking?
Right.
Why did you feel the need to take that position and post it? Everybody knows that you feel that way anyway. Look at what you caused yourself, And so they've learned from that. So it started out as a negative. It ended up as a positive. The board is now much more educated on things they should do. And they also have a PR firm to bounce things off of now before they publish anything publicly online.
That's a great point into companies to protect their image. And Renee spoke earlier too about social media, and it's very interesting. I mean, we live in a day and age now where, and this abounds. You could see this in the news in the last month. You can have an employee that discloses too much, or now you have some of these investigative reporters. Recently, an NFL football team had an employee who just was out there, just said all kinds of stuff, and he's terminated. You got to watch out with what you're what you're putting out there, the content, and then when you get with the clients, you have to deal with what do they want shown, what they don't, and the contrary is positive press as well, something that they want to emphasize on. Any kind of final thoughts on where this industry is going, where it should go as we look at the technology age continues to evolve? Smartphones, which don't necessarily make us smarter, certainly they make things a little more convenient, but any major opportunities and risks on the horizon in the space as you see it, say, in the next 10 to 20 years?
What I will say, and it's near term, this is not 10 to 20 years, this is in the next 2 to 3. I just actually wrote an article for Security Executive magazine on this. And we are in a position today where we can be predictive and proactive of risk as opposed to being reactive and responsive to risk. And how do we do that? We do that using AI and machine learning. Now, we hear all the bad things about AI and machine learning and how it can be misutilized. But everything that we have in an organization today is data-driven. I don't care if it's a camera, it's an access control reader, building management systems that turn on, turn off lights, turn on heating. Those are all data streams, right? When we take that and we combine it with other publicly available data streams like crime statistics, real-time 911 reporting, weather data, and we put all this into a data lake. And then we get some really smart young folks that know how to take a question, because you have to ask a question, right? And then you use AI to answer that question based on the data that's in the data lake. And an example I gave today. So I'm Jeff, and I'm in the middle of a divorce, and I've come into work a couple times, and I haven't been sober, and I'm already on the bubble with HR, right? They're looking at me heavy. And all of a sudden, I come into work at 12:30 a.m., right? And I go to my office, and I'm in my office from 12:30 a.m. to 2:30 a.m., and then I leave. Normally, that wouldn't even be detected until somebody did an audit of the access control system. But when it's embedded like this into a data lake, then all that information from human resources, from data says, Jeff was in the building. His normal shift is 8 to 5, and he was in the building at 12:30 in the morning, and he was there till 2:30, and he was in this particular office because the lights came on due to the building automation system. And that data is all pulled together. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I was doing something nefarious, right? What it means is maybe it's time to have a conversation with Jeff to ask him what he was doing in the building from 12:30 to 2:30, because it may have been just simply
Do some printing.
I'm on the bubble, and I'm trying to get caught up with my work, and I'm trying to make a good impression, or I could be downloading company data because I'm getting ready to exit and I know I'm leaving, and I want to create harm for the company. So
which one was it, Jeff? Tell us.
Oh, it was neither. I'm not in a divorce, but I just use my name so I don't have to incriminate anybody else. But but that's what data brings us. Data brings us the ability to be smart and be proactive instead of reactive. And I think that is a big piece of where our industry is heading. I see a lot of folks advertising AI, but for the consumer, you really need to ask what the AI is and how the AI is programmed. And you also need to ask about machine learning, because AI without machine learning is just Alexa, So we do a lot of education on that for folks. But yeah, that's an amazing capability that in the next 2 to 3 years is really going to blossom and help this industry.
Interesting. So I heard a lot of themes there too. Follow the person you want to be or the company you want to be, and I think that's very helpful as folks have gone out there and proved these competencies and that. Thanks for joining us. Any final thoughts about the CSX conference? We got a couple more days here before this wraps up, or 3 actually. How's it go? Final thoughts on the conference?
Well, look, GSX and ASIS. ASIS is an amazing organization. I got my 25-year pin today. I've been a member for 25 years, but I've been a volunteer leader that whole time. I started out as the chapter greeter. I actually stood at the door the first day I got into a chapter, and they said, you stand here and greet people, take a business card, show them to a seat. And I was a regional leader and a senior regional leader and on the North American board. And now I'm a community vice president, which communities are an area. But volunteer, get out there. That's a great way to meet people, to learn about the industry. And you might even get a couple things that you can put on your resume, right?
Right.
That you might not have been able to do either. And a lot of this industry, as Tim said, is about relationships, right? And if I know you through a volunteer role and I know how well you perform in a volunteer role, you may just be that person I want to hire, or that I want to advance, or that I want to help. And ASIS, a lot of what I do, what I give back, is because of the graciousness that's been shown to me and the opportunities that I have through this industry and this conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us and spending some time.
You bet.
And it's been our pleasure. And special thanks to Lioness Tactics, Renee, Ledlow Security Group, Mark Ledlow, our host. And it was my distinct honor to be a guest host for the Fearless Mindset podcast. Thanks for joining us.